Every time I sit down, open Lightroom, and start playing around with the different masking tools, I continue to just be kind of floored, frankly, about how good it is and how accurate it is, but also about all the kind of fun, cool stuff you can do. And that's what I'm going to do in this video. I've got a photo here, and there's the original photo. And what I did is I hit auto, and then I made a few minor tweaks to what auto did, and that took me to that. And so I'm already with a much better photo, but what I want to do is isolate specific parts of the photo in order to control my edits and get the end result that I want to get, of course. And that's where masking comes in here in Lightroom. And if you've seen my previous videos about Lightroom, or if you use Lightroom or seen somebody else's videos about Lightroom, you know that the masking is just, it's world class. It is really fantastic. And so this video is going to be about using masks and how you can overlap and what they call intersect different masks to kind of isolate areas of an image. So I'm done with basic. I also removed a spot, and what I want to do is go into masking, and I'm going to start with sky, which you'll see it finds the sky. I mean, it did a pretty darn good job, even including like behind some of these branches. It continues to impress me really every time I use it. All the masking tools and the accuracy. I'm really quite happy with it overall. And I'm going to do the things I kind of typically do to a sky, and in this case, it's basically kind of controlling the highlights, pulling the temperature down. I'm going to make a minor tint adjustment as well, and a little bit of saturation while I'm at it. And then I like to go, I'm not going into point color here, but I am going to go into effects, and I'm going to take the texture down a little bit, so that kind of softens that up a little bit. And I'm actually going to give it a little bit of dehaze as well. And that just kind of cuts through and gives me a little bit better overall look. So if I turn this mask off and you look at the before, just in the sky, in the after, it's I think much better, and it's got me going really in the right direction. And that's pretty simple and straightforward. Hit sky, it finds it, you make your adjustments. But what I want to do next is really start to isolate certain areas, because I need to do some things in the water that kind of mimic what I just did in the sky. And there's not a mask where you go in and click, find water, for example. And so what I'm going to do here is use a luminance range mask. There's lots of different ways. There's like, many ways to skin a cat, as the old expression goes. But in this case, I'm going to pick a luminance range mask, and I'm going to come over here and get something, about like that. I'm just trying to get some of this water, and you can see what it does. It grabs a whole lot of stuff, because that kind of, that light value, it's a luminance range mask, so it's built on light values. That's really applicable in a lot of the photo, but I really just want it kind of in that water. So this is where you kind of do the intersect. So I'm going to do a subtraction. As you can see, as you hover, it says subtract from mask. And this is what's so cool. You start getting this insanely intelligent control. So I'm going to subtract, and I'm going to subtract a linear gradient, and I'm going to pull that down from the top. And so all I'm basically saying is, hey, Lightroom, take the luminance range that I already identified, but subtract what I've just included in this linear gradient mask. And so as you can see here, I've basically created a linear gradient from the top down. There we go. And all I'm going to include is the stuff on the bottom. So I'm really just kind of isolating that water, and I could probably collapse this a little bit more as well. Maybe something about like that. All I want to do is just get the water kind of isolated. There we go. It's right there. And now I'm going to come in and make a few adjustments. So the first adjustment is I want to brighten it a little bit. I want it to be a little bit closer to what I did in the sky. I'm also going to add a little bit of contrast. So like a 18 or 19, maybe around there. And I'm going to cool it off a little bit as well. So about a -10 or 11, and a minor bump in tint, like about a 3. And not a massive change, but the ability to intersect and overlap those masks and subtract from my luminance range mask just gives me much better control. So if I show you the overlay, you can see the red area. That overlay is where my effects, these edits are taking place. And if you look at the before and after for the water, there it is before, and there it is after. A little bit bluer, a little bit brighter, just a little bit more control over that area, which is what I love about the ability to do this. The other thing, though, is I'm not really done. I want to do another mask and another intersect. So I'm going to create a new mask, and in this case, I'm going to do a color range mask. And I'm going to get these orange kind of colored trees there in the center. And as I click that, same kind of thing happens. That kind of brownish orange is showing up in a lot of places. And so, of course, that's another subtraction. I like to come in and subtract with a linear gradient. In this case, I'm going to go from the bottom up to subtract. And so I'm going to do something about like that and just kind of fade that in. And as you can see, I'm grabbing some of the trees here that are kind of reflected, but I've got the majority of the trees and the reflection, a little bit of the water, and you can refine these if you need to. But the point is, I was pretty quickly able to isolate just the trees and remove that color range from the water so that I can come in and do my edits here. And so in this case, I want to brighten these trees a little bit. They're just a little too dark, so maybe, mid 30s, something about like that. And I'm going to give it a little bit of saturation as well. So maybe about a 15 or 20, maybe something about like that. And I'm going to give it a little bit of warmth too. I just want to bring up some of that orangey kind of color, and I'll do another thing here in a minute to help me isolate that even more. But that's looking pretty good, and so far I think that looks good. But the other thing, and you've possibly seen my previous videos about point color, you can do that within a mask, which again, just it's all about control. The amount of control that Lightroom is giving us here is just pretty insane. So I'm going to go into point color within this mask. So in other words, I'm just really in those trees with point color. And with the dropper, I'm going to grab these orange trees in the center. So maybe about like that color. And all I want to do is shift the hue slightly to the left. I don't want to go too far because it'll make it too red, right? I don't want to do that. Although that looks pretty cool, it's just not normal or natural looking. So I'm going to do like a -7 or 8. I'm going to add a little bit of saturation and maybe a tiny bit of luminance. Something about like that. I like that quite a bit. And then while I'm at it, I'm going to go in here and also add some texture to that area. And that's going to go about a 15 or 20, giving a little bit of crunch to those trees. I just think that looks kind of nice. And so let me show you how I've isolated that with, in this case, a color range mask and subtracting a linear gradient to really just give me the trees. There it is before, a lot darker, a lot more muted, that sort of thing. And now brighter, more saturated, a bit more vibrant, also added some texture. So that's just fast and powerful and accurate. I just love the accuracy here and how you can do that. And I'm really done with the masking, but I got a couple of other things that I really want to do to this photo. So I'm going to use one of my favorite tools, which is Color Mixer, and go into point color. And here I'm going to grab these blues, so something about like that in the sky. And all I want to do is bump up some of the saturation. I just want a little bit more intensity in the blues, so maybe something like that. While I'm at it, you can just use this dropper again and again. I'm going to click on the dropper again. I'm going to go grab this kind of yellow-orange color there, and I'm going to pull that luminance down slightly. It's a little bit bright, so I don't want to go too dark, but just a little bit there. And I'm also going to grab this kind of orangey color here, and I'm going to lift that luminance. There's quite a bit of that in those trees. So you can see how I'm just kind of brightening that area by isolating that with point color. And then the other thing I like to do here is go into this lily pad, and I'm just going to make it a little bit greener and a little bit more saturated and a little bit brighter. It just kind of will pop those colors. It's also going to pop the lily pads back there because it's picking up that same color. But I think that looks fine. And so overall, Color Mixer took me from that look to that look. It's subtle, but it's useful and helpful. And speaking of subtle, one of their amazing tools, I feel like this is like a hit list of all my favorite things in Lightroom, but there's a lot of them, and that's calibration. All I want to do, and if you're not familiar with calibration, I did a video about it there, but it's essentially based on the idea that RGB, red, green, and blue, each of those color values exists in every pixel, and so these are getting adjusted at the pixel level. And what I'm going to do is take the saturation of the blue primary and drag that to the right to give it a bit of a bump, but you may notice it also bumps up every other color because there's a blue, bit of blue, I should say, in every single pixel. So if you look at the before, just a little bit more muted, and then after, it's got a tiny bit more pop. I like to use calibration as kind of a finishing touch sort of color tool to give me a little extra oomph kind of at the finish line, just a little something else that gets me to where I want to be. But if you look at the before, that's my photo. Quite a bit darker, as is often the case, right? Especially in landscapes. Sky is going to be brighter, foreground, and especially that middle area that's in a lot of shadow is going to be darker. But some targeted adjustments with masks and the mask intersects to help me isolate areas. and then a little bit of color mixer and color calibration at the end really gives me a photo that to me just kind of pops. And that's the power of all the masking tools, and especially that intersect ability in Lightroom. Just lets you isolate areas quickly and easily so you can kind of just get in, get your edit done, and move on, and not sacrifice control in the process. And that's a big thing for me because I want to control what I'm doing in terms of my edits, in terms of where the color goes, the light, whatever it may be. That's how I'm using these mask intersects to get it done. And that's one of the things I'm loving about Lightroom. So I'll be back soon with more Lightroom videos. If you have specific Lightroom subjects you'd like me to cover in future videos, leave a comment down below. I'll be back soon, guys. Thanks for watching. You guys take care, and until next time, adios.